Welcome to our discussion of the legislative process. Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution states, "All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives." A bill is a proposed piece of legislation. As you can see in this figure, every bill must be approved by both houses, the House and the Senate, in identical form. In general, bills must pass through 5 steps to become law. Introduction. First step is introduction. A member of the House of Representatives or the Senate formally proposes the bill. Step 2, committee review. Subgroups within the House and the Senate, composed of legislators who have expertise in the bill's subject matter, review the bill. Step 3, House and Senate approval. If the bill makes it out of committee, a majority of members in the House and the Senate must approve it. Step 4, conference committee reconciliation. The conference committee reconciles the bill when different versions have passed in the House and the Senate, and reconciles just means makes the two the same. Step 5, presidential approval. If the president signs the bill, it becomes law. But even after this arduous process, a presidential veto can kill the bill. Bills are introduced differently in each chamber of Congress. In the House of Representatives, a member of a legislator's staff drafts the proposed legislation, and the House member puts the bill into the hopper, a wooden box that sits on a desk at the front of the House chamber. Upon introduction, a bill is referred to as H.R., meaning House of Representatives, followed by a number that indicates the order in which it was introduced in a given legislative session. For example, H.R. 207. In the Senate, the process is less formal. Here, senators can announce proposed legislation to colleagues in a speech on the floor. Alternatively, a senator can submit a written draft of the proposed legislation to an official known as the Senate clerk, or sometimes a senator will propose legislation simply by offering it as an amendment to an already pending piece of legislation. Once a bill is introduced in the Senate, it is referred to as S, or Senate, followed by its number reflecting the order in which it was introduced in a given legislative session. For example, S 711. Before 1995, a bill introduced in the House of Representatives could be subject to joint referral, the practice of referring the bill simultaneously to 2 different House committees for consideration. But the 104th Congress abolished joint committee referrals. Today, bills introduced in the House are referred to one committee called the lead committee. Occasionally, when the substance of a bill warrants additional referrals to other committees that also have jurisdiction over the subject of that bill, the bill might be subsequently referred to a second committee. In the Senate, bills typically are referred to only one committee. All right, the bill in committee. After introduction by a member of the House or the Senate, a bill is read into the congressional record, a formal record of all actions taken by Congress. Because of the large number of bills introduced, both chambers rely on an extensive committee structure that facilitates the consideration of so high a volume of bills. Most bills that are introduced die in committee. That is, a committee does not consider the bill, sometimes because the committee does not have the time in a legislative session to take up the measure, or declines to forward the bill to the full chamber. Each congressional committee and subcommittee is composed of a majority of members of the majority party in the chamber. For example, if 218 or more members, a majority in the House, elected to the House of Representatives are Republicans, then every committee and subcommittee in the House has a majority of Republicans. The parties in each chamber decide members' committee and subcommittee assignments. Though the selection of committee chairs varies between chambers and parties, committee chairs are often chosen using the seniority system, by which the member with the longest continuous tenure on a standing committee receives preference when the committee chooses its chair. The committee chairs run committee meetings and control the flow of work in each committee. Although the seniority system is an institution in Congress, it is an informal system, and seniority does not always determine who will be the committee chair. Chairs are chosen by a secret ballot, and in recent years, junior members sometimes have won out over senior committee members. Standing committees are permanent committees with a defined legislative jurisdiction. The House has 24 standing committees and the Senate has 20. The House Committee on Homeland Security and the Senate Armed Services Committees are examples of standing committees. Select committees are specially created to consider a specific policy issue or to address a particular concern. In 2005, the House formed a Select Committee, the Select Bipartisan Committee to investigate the preparation for and response to Hurricane Katrina. That was the name of the committee, which examined what went wrong in the preparations for and response to that killer storm. Other select committees have focused on such issues as Homeland Security and terrorism, aging, and transportation. Joint committees are bicameral committees composed of members of both chambers of Congress. Sometimes these committees offer administrative or managerial guidance of various kinds. For example, one joint committee oversees the presidential inauguration, and another supervises the administration of the Library of Congress. In addition to the congressional committees, the House has more than 90 subcommittees, and the Senate has 68. Subcommittees typically handle specific areas of the committee's jurisdiction. For example, the House Committee on Foreign Affairs is a standing committee. Within the committee, there are 7 subcommittees: the Subcommittee on Africa and Global Health, the Subcommittee on Asia, Pacific, and Global Environment, the Subcommittee on Europe, the Subcommittee on the Middle East and South Asia, the Subcommittee on International Organizations, Human Rights, and Oversight, the Subcommittee on Terrorism, Non-Proliferation, and Trade, and the Subcommittee on the Western Hemisphere. Each subcommittee handles bills relevant to its specified jurisdiction. When a committee or a subcommittee favors a measure, it usually takes 4 actions. The first one is agency review. During agency review, the committee or subcommittee asks the executive agencies that would administer the law for written comments on the measure. Secondly, they hold hearings. Next, the committee or subcommittee hold hearings to gather information and views from experts, including interest groups, concerned citizens, and celebrities involved with the issue. Thirdly, markup. During markup, the committee marks up the bill with suggested language changes and amendments. The committee does not actually alter the bill, rather. Members recommend changes to the full chamber. In a typical bill markup, the committee may eliminate a component of the proposal or amend the proposal in some way. Lastly, a report is issued. After agreeing to the wording of the bill, the committee issues a report to the full chamber explaining the bill and its intent. The bill may then be considered by the full chamber. In the House of Representatives, a special measure known as a discharge petition is used to extract a bill from a committee to have it considered by the entire House. A discharge petition requires the signature of a majority, 218 of the members of the House. I'm going to give you a little bit more in-depth information on the discharge petition. A discharge petition is a means of bringing a bill out of committee and to the floor for consideration without a report from the committee and usually without cooperation of the leadership. Discharge petitions are most often associated with the House of Representatives, though many state legislatures have similar procedures. They are used when the chair of a committee refuses to place a bill or resolution on the committee's agenda. By never reporting a bill, the matter will never leave the committee, and the full House will not be able to consider it. A successful petition discharges the committee from further consideration of a bill or resolution and brings it directly to the floor. The discharge petition, and the threat of one, gives more power to individual members of the House and usurps a small amount of power from the leadership and committee chairs. The modern discharge petition requires the signature of an absolute majority of House members, 218. Only twice has it been used successfully on major legislation in recent history. Discharge petitions are rare. A successful discharge petition embarrasses the leadership. As such, members of the majority party are hesitant to support something that would make the Speaker and their own leaders look bad. Naturally, the minority party will often support discharge petitions precisely to embarrass the leadership. Furthermore, since the signers of a petition are not private, majority party members are pressured not to sign and open themselves up to retribution from the leadership should they disobey. When signing of a petition was secret, or more specifically, confirmation that it was signed was secret, as a representative could claim whatever they liked. Petitions were generally only used for serious discontent in the majority. The secrecy also meant that members could claim to be for a piece of legislation while at the same time taking no action to force a vote on such legislation. With the secrecy removed, it became more difficult to disassemble in such a way. It also opened signers to more direct retribution from the leadership. Under the old system, if a petition was unsuccessful, the leadership would never know if a particular representative signed the petition. If it was successful, all the defectors would at least be in the same boat. With open signing, the leadership can exert maximum pressure on stopping the last few signatures. Those who make the last few signatures open themselves to especially severe payback, as early signers could argue privately that they were only posturing and didn't think the petition would pass. In 1994, a strong counter-campaign from the House leadership helped stop the proposal of William Zeliff and Rob Andrews of AZ spending cuts, for example. The proposals received 204 signatures but could not muster the last 14. The removal of secrecy also encourages discharge petitions that exist merely to take a public stand on an issue. Since secrecy was removed in the U.S. House, 30 petitions have attained 60 signatures or fewer. A notable situation where the threat of a discharge petition could be extremely relevant is if the majority party in the House loses its majority for some reason, such as due to defections or deaths. If the old majority leadership refuses to stand aside, the new majority could file a discharge petition to elect a new speaker. This situation has not yet occurred. The most recent successful discharge petition was the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, known as McCain-Feingold in the Senate, and Shays-Meehan in the House. Starting in 1997, several attempts were made to bring to the floor via the discharge petition. It finally passed in 2002, and the Senate passed it 60-40, narrowly avoiding a filibuster. In 1993, the discharge petition disclosure bill was passed by the House, which made the rule changing requiring public disclosure of signers. This bill was itself filed with a discharge petition. The balanced budget amendment received 218 signatures twice, in 1992 and 1993. However, it did not pass the Senate. Before 1993, the last successful discharge petition was in 1985, in which the process was carried to its conclusion, rather than the bill dying or the leadership allowing the bill out of committee. Since, as noted above, the leadership was simply has simply relented on some bills with pending petitions. This was the Firearm Owners Protection Act, known as the McClure-Volkmer Act. The act was a scaling back of gun control legislation that made it easier for gun shows to operate without government interference. The Senate passed the bill, but House Judiciary Chair Peter W. Rodino, Democrat from New Jersey, declared it dead on arrival. In response, the NRA launched a strong campaign to pass the bill in the House via discharge petition. Rather than let the Senate version of the bill out of committee, Representative Rodino instead proffered a compromise piece of legislation with William Hughes, another Democrat from New Jersey. However, the discharge petition succeeded and the Senate version was passed after minor amendments were added. If we look at this chart, it compares the legislative process in the House and the Senate. For example, if a House bill is discharged or makes it out of committee, then it goes to the Rules Committee, one of the most important committees in the House, which decides on the length of debate and the scope of amendments that will be allowed on a bill. The Rules Committee sets the structure for the debate that ensues in the full House. For important bills, the Rules Committee tends to set strict limits on the types of amendments that can be attached to a bill. In general, the Rules Committee also establishes limits to floor debate in the House. The Senate does not have a committee to do the work of the Rules Committee, but the Senate's small size allows members to agree to the terms of debate through unanimous consent agreements. Unanimous consent must be just that. Every senator needs to agree to the terms of debate, including time limits on debate. And even if one senator objects, unanimous consent does not take effect. Senators do not look favorably on objections to unanimous consent, and so such objections are rare. Objecting to unanimous consent agreements can potentially undermine a senator's ability to get legislation passed by provoking the ire of other senators. If the Senate does not reach unanimous consent, the possibility of a filibuster arises, a procedural move that attempts to halt the passage of the bill. Sometimes the mere threat of a filibuster is enough to compel a bill's supporters to alter a bill's content. During a filibuster, a senator can speak for an unlimited time on the Senate floor. Filibustering senators do not need to restrict themselves to speaking only on the subject of the bill. They just need to keep talking. Some senators have read the Bible, cookbooks, and even the 9X Yellow Pages into congressional record. In the 1930s, Senator Huey Long, Democrat from Louisiana, filibustered many bills, once speaking for 15 hours to block one that he viewed as helping the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Long, viewed as a character by many of his Senate colleagues, was a favorite among visitors to the Senate galleries, where he would entertain onlookers with New Orleans recipes for pot liquors and with his articulations of Shakespeare in a Louisiana drawl. Former Republican South Carolina Senator Strom Thurmond holds the Senate record for the longest filibuster. In an attempt to block the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1957, Thurmond filibustered for 24 hours and 18 minutes. Let's watch this news clip about the nuclear option.
It strips the minority party's ability to block the president's nominees. It's called the nuclear option for good reason. Just a few years ago, even Democratic leader Harry Reid said he wouldn't do it, saying it would be
a black chapter in the history of the Senate.
So what about now?
Why isn't this a black chapter in history
Well,
of the Senate?
things have changed dramatically since 2005. Dramatically. For the last 4.5 years, they've done everything they can to deny the fact that Obama was elected and then reelected.
Translation, GOP obstruction is unprecedented. To back that up, Democrats point to statistics from the nonpartisan Congressional Research Service. In the history of the country, there have been 168 filibusters of presidential nominees. About half, 82, happened during the Obama administration.
In summary, this is a power grab.
Angry Republicans don't necessarily dispute Democrats' statistics about nominees they have blocked. Instead, they point to how many judges they have confirmed, 215, and rejected 5. And when it comes to the fight that Democrats call the last straw over vacancies in the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, the Republican leader argues Democrats are manufacturing a crisis to distract from the Obamacare debacle.
A fake fight over judges that aren't even needed.
Now, Democrats say they get that this benefits them now that they're in the majority, but certainly the tables will be turned the day that they lose that majority status. But they essentially shrug their shoulders and say that this is a risk that they're willing to take because, in the words of one senior Democrat, the other option is continued obstruction.
A filibuster can end by a vote of cloture, in which a supermajority of 60 senators agrees to invoke cloture and end debate. Cloture is initiated if 16 senators sign a cloture petition. In 2010, when Senator Scott Brown, Republican from Massachusetts, was elected in a special election to replace the late Democratic Senator Edward Kennedy, the specter of filibusters in the Senate became more likely as Brown's election, as the 41st Republican in the Senate, meant that Democrats had lost the 60-member filibuster-proof majority they had held. After a bill is debated by the full chamber, the members vote on it. Before a bill can become a law, identical versions of the bill must pass in both the House and the Senate. If only one chamber passes a bill during a congressional term, the bill dies. If both the House and the Senate pass bills on the same same topic, but with differences between the bills are then sent to a conference committee. A bipartisan committee composed of legislators whose job it is to reconcile the two versions of the bill. Typically, the legislators appointed to the conference committee will be members of the standing committees that consider the bills in their chambers. After the committee develops a compromise version of the bill then goes back to both chambers for another vote. If the bill does not pass in both chambers during a congressional term, the bill is dead, although it can be reintroduced in the next session. If both chambers approve the bill, it then goes to the president for signature or veto. Now you see why this is so complicated. When both the House and the Senate manage to pass a bill in identical form, it proceeds to the president, who may take one of three actions. First, the president may sign it, in which case the bill becomes a law. Second, the president may choose to do nothing. If the president does nothing and Congress is in session, the bill becomes law after 10 days without the president's signature. A president may take this route if he or she does not support the bill but knows that Congress would override a veto. If, however, the Congress has adjourned, that is, the bill has passed at the end of a legislative session, the president may exercise a pocket veto. A pocket veto occurs when Congress has adjourned and the president waits 10 days without signing the bill. The president effectively puts the bill in his pocket and the bill dies. Finally, a president may exercise the executive power of a veto, rejecting the bill and returning it to Congress with a message explaining why the bill should not become law. Congress can vote to override the veto by a 2/3 vote in both houses, in which case the bill becomes law. But overriding a presidential veto is difficult and rare achievement.